folks to trickle in, but out of respect for those that came on time, we'll get started. If anyone has any cell phones on them, they want to turn those to vibrate or silent. The restrooms are down the hall on the right before you get to the front desk. Anticipate the program lasting approximately an hour or so. That's somewhat flexible depending on the number of questions you ask. And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the Friends of the Tewksbury Library, who sponsor all our programs here at the library for adults, teens, and kids. We're a very active programming library. We run one, sometimes two programs a day for adults. Also want to thank Jason from Tewksbury Telemedia, who is here this morning filming the event. Don't worry, he's focused on the speaker. He's not picking up audience members, so your identity is safe. And we'll leave it at that there. But we thank Jason. This will be up on the Tewksbury Telemedia TV channel and up on the town's YouTube page probably within the next few days or so. So you can relive it all again. How about that? Okay. So, and then one last plug. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock in this room, we have a kind of a similar talk. We have a gentleman who is also in his 70s, also a Massachusetts resident, who recently walked across the country. So that'll be tomorrow night, 7 o'clock in this room. So maybe if you're into this, you might be into that. Okay. So this morning, we're going to meet 70-year-old Massachusetts native John Springfield, who last year rode his bicycle alone across the country. In 44 days, he traveled nearly 3,000 miles from Georgia to California. John's trip was far from easy. He overcame dangerous weather, flat tires, forced detours, and rough roads. But it was perhaps the most fulfilling experience of his life, and John will join us to share memorable stories from his inspiring and often hilarious adventure, accompanied by photos. So all 15 of us or so, let's give a big round of applause to John. All right, there you go, John.
Thank you. I can't wait to hear the guy who walked across this. My name is John Springfield, and this is a little slideshow about my bike trip across the country. A little background: in 1976, when I was a young man of 27 going on 28, I also biked across from Seattle to Boston, a much longer ride. It was about 3,200 miles. Back then, I could average 105 miles a day. Now, this time, I said, first of all, I didn't even know if I was going to complete it. It was one of those, oh, I hit 70, can I still do this routine? So I thought, well, maybe if I could do 70 miles a day. In reality, it turned out I averaged 65. There were some long days of 90 and some short days of 30, but the average was 65. So this was kind of to see, could I do it again? So I told myself, I don't have to finish this. I already did it once. 43 years ago, 43 pounds lighter. I'm just going to try it and see what happens. So in February, because it's so icy up here, I said, I want to go down south, and I'll just pick some place along the coast that would, be easiest. So if you notice, the U.S. kind of comes in this way and comes in that way on each coast. So the shortest way across is that southern route, hugging the Mexican border, the Gulf of Mexico, and across Texas. So that's the idea. So I could still say I did it, but it was like 400 miles shorter than the long route, right? And also, this is interesting. You can see you get up to about 45, maybe 4,800 feet. I tried to get the way to go that would not go way up in the mountains, 10,000 feet and all that. So, and of course, on the East Coast here, it's pretty flat. You're right along the Gulf of Mexico. So the first half of the ride, there was not too many hills and stuff. If you're on a bike, though, there's three things you want to do. Try to avoid the bad weather, but you can't because you're on a long ride. You know you're going to hit rain and stuff like that. But you're always looking for the other two things. Where do I eat and where do I sleep? So I said, I'm going to make this easy. For the first time in my life, I have money. I'm going to just do motels the whole way. Because when I did it as a young man, I was camping out half the time. And it's a real pain. You get up in the morning and then you got to put the camping equipment away. So I'm going to make it easy on myself and just do the motel thing. So I carried a little notebook computer. Each night all these motels now have Wi-Fi. I would book the next motel ahead. So I always had a destination. So I knew if it was raining or whatever, I don't have to be searching for motels. So that's the idea behind it. Before I go though, just take a look. This is a satellite photo. I should have looked this before I left because it's all nice and green halfway across the country. So you're going through, you know, forest and agricultural land. But what you don't realize is then you hit the desert, which is like a 1,000-mile desert. But again, I'm going earlier so to avoid the extreme heat. No, you don't want to be out there in the desert in the summertime. It's like 120 degrees in some places. So I was hoping, you know, I could handle maybe 80, 90 degrees. After that, I start melting. But if I would have looked at this beforehand, I may not have gone and tried to do this, you know. But so that was the idea. The first thing when I left, probably the highest thing I had to go over was this bridge in Brunswick that went over to Jekyll Island. And it's actually quite steep, but for the next, I don't know, 800 miles, I didn't hit that many, you know, steep hills or anything. It was also a nice 50 degrees up here. It was cold. By the way, I just rented a car or an SUV, threw the bike in the back, and then left it down there at the airport in Brunswick. So that's how I got down there, two days of driving. So I started heading west, and this is a major road. I think it was US 84, 82, something like that. But it also had a bike route sign on it. So I thought, cool, that means I'm going to have a nice little break or a little edge of the highway where I can bike and not worry too much about the traffic. But what did they do? They put a rumble strip on it. and a little closer up, you can see it. And you know, the highway engineers don't think about this, but if you're going to designate this as a bike route, then you could at least move the rumble strip over and let me have the right part of it, you know. But that's just like, you know, what you put up with when you're biking. So this is just 84. It was really flat through Georgia. It just seemed like it went forever. Lots of pine trees all over the place. And then within 3 days, I'm in Florida, the panhandle of Florida. So, you know, I got my sea legs the first day because, you know, I really hadn't done much biking that whole year up here in January. Not a great time to go biking. So I'm going along and I've got this rhythm. It seems like 65, 70-mile days are going to be the thing to do. And when I go through little towns, I like, you know, checking out the arc. This was, I think, in Monticello, Florida. It just was kind of cool, you know, the courthouse or whatever it was. The other thing I like is little historical things and a lot of little towns. And I like going through little towns because a lot of them now are putting these murals up on the sides of old buildings. And this one I thought was really cool. I can't even remember exactly where it was. But that's my bike, but that's a painting. And if you look, you know, it looks like it's the bike part of the painting or not, you know. So then, just moving along, I'm now still in the panhandle of Florida. I'm not on the Gulf yet, but I'm going to start going down there. Oh, by the way, what route did I took? I just took AAA maps like this. I'm going on major roads. Or I also took these maps from the Adventure Cycling Association. And these are more detailed and they tell, you know, about where bike shops are and stuff. But I was pretty much on my own route for quite a while, and then I joined up that route later on. So I'm just tooling along. I should mention that in here there was a major hurricane that hit, I think, 2 years ago. So there were areas you'd still see all the twisted wreckage and stuff. It's kind of wild through part of here. But so far I had decent weather, except, you know, and I came through the Defuniak Springs or whatever it's called. There was an old railroad or something there. But here's the part I'm going to get down to along the beach, basically. I just wanted to get out of the forest and say, hey, I want to see, kind of like, make it feel like I'm in Florida, right? So I came on down, and the idea was that the next day I would go over into downtown Pensacola and then hug the Gulf of Mexico for quite a ways. It was pretty soupy. That's the only way I can explain it. It's not exactly fog, but I call it soup. That was the weather, you know, the hot air, the air comes off of the Gulf of Mexico and blends with the, you know, the colder ground temperatures, and you get kind of a foggy soup. And then this one's when I had to go over the spit, over the causeway to the Pensacola Beach or whatever it was. But you can see it was kind of soupy, but still, it's a lot better than cycling in cold weather. And here was the plan again, and this is, I have to call it a plan because I'm going to show you what happened. Right here is Mobile Bay, and there's a ferry that goes from here over to an island. It's like a 7-mile ferry, and instead of going through industrialized Mobile, I was going to take this really nice, you know, like sand dune-y type way of getting there. So, but I noticed that there's fog, and I thought, gee, I wonder if the ferry might be out. So right about here, you have to decide, do I keep going, or do I actually go up and through Mobile, which is not any fun? And there's this big sign that says, call here for this ferry. I called it 3, 4, 5 times. One time it says that the number was out of order. The other time it said, well, it's been too many people calling, call again, blah, 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 blah. So he says, it doesn't look too bad, you know. So it's 23 miles. No, that means nothing, but on a bike it's a lot. From this here to here where the ferry is. So I thought, well, okay. Let's go see how it goes. One thing I wanted to say though, when I came across here, it was all fog, and I'm on this major highway, but it had a breakdown lane, but I couldn't see more than like 15 feet ahead of me. And it was like, you didn't know where the bridge ended. It was rush hour, not a lot of fun. However, when I did get over to Pensacola, and I'm backtracking a little bit here, I saw this sign that the Spanish had landed here in 1559 with 1,000 people. They established a colony, and it just kind of like, this is what, 60 years before the Mayflower? It's just amazing. 1,000 people were living there, and then within a couple of years, a hurricane hit, and they wiped them out, and the few that left went back. But it was just amazing. You don't realize this whole area was settled way before the East Coast was settled. I'm kind of a minor history buff, so these things are interesting. So I'm going along the spit of land, and I finally hit my next state, Alabama. Again, see how kind of soupy it is in the background? But I'm making progress. I'm like, wow, you know, this is easier than I thought. But then I get to the end, finally, at the ferry. And this is where the ferry goes. And there's a little hut next to it. And next to the hut is this little sign that says, sorry, we're closed. Call this number, the same number that you wouldn't pick up for further information. So I'm stuck out there, and I'm saying the only way I can do this is find a motel and wait till tomorrow and then take the ferry across. But I realized there are no motels along there. It's all beach houses. There's no, you know, overnight stays. It's beach houses, rentals for like, you know, 2 weeks or something. So I have to go the 23 miles back. And this is the part where, and if you're on a bike trip, you just start saying, what am I doing here? Then I get a slow leak in my tire. It starts raining. It's like one of those very bad, terrible, no good days, you know. But I said, all right, you just have to get back to a motel. So basically that was like 46 miles I didn't need to do. So that was the first detour. There's some other ones I had to do. So then once I checked in the motel, I got washed up and stuff, I felt better. And then the next day, I came back here, and then I went up this way, and I had to go through Mobile. There is a tunnel under the bay, but that's for cars only. So, and I did find a really nice section, I guess you call it the East Bay or whatever it is. It was really kind of nice. It was one of the few places that I thought, wow, this is nice. I found this great little place to have, food, and I stopped there, and they had something called John's Breakfast. I says, I gotta have John's Breakfast because my name's John. So, but then I got into Mobile, and this is what I had to put up with. It doesn't look that bad, but it got worse. You're like kind of on a freeway, not really a freeway. You could legally bike here, but it was just all industrial with big tanks of oil and all this stuff. It was not very, very good. And then Of course, when I finally got to my motel, the last 5 miles, it rained, okay? But I will have to tell you, after like just a few more days of rain area, I went for almost a whole month with no rain, so I can't complain, you know. So, then things started getting interesting. This is where life intervenes when you have plans. I decided I was going to go. I was going to go up here and go into Mississippi, not along the coast. After all, I wanted to go more inland, and so I headed off that way. I actually made it, I was on this US 98. Of course, I don't know if you can see, it has the rumble strips again, forcing me out into the traffic lane. But that's why I have a mirror on my bike to keep from being smushed. And I actually made it to Mississippi, so I'm like, wow, you know, I'm moving along here. Then I stopped at this little town. I checked my cell phone for any messages, and my sister-in-law called me and said, my brother is in really bad shape, like infections that could kill him. So I'm sitting there saying, well, okay, now what am I going to do? I can't continue this ride. I would be thinking about him. He may get better, he may get worse. So I had to turn around and go back to Mobile because that's where I could get a rental car at I got it at the airport. So there I am re-entering Alabama after I just left Alabama. And I rented a car, drove the 2 days home, and I said, you know, that's it. This trip is over. You know, you tried, you did what, 700, 800 miles, I don't know what it was. You know, you're getting old, you don't have anything to prove. Well, I stayed there in you know, Boston here for a couple days, and he improved, and then he got, you know, out of the ICU, and he was okay. So then I'm sitting at home, it's cold and crummy here, and I remember that warmer weather down there, and I said, no, I gotta go back and continue this ride. So rented another car 2 days later, got down back to Mobile and started the trip out again. Changed my plans slightly. This time I am gonna go along the coast, not go more inland. And so that's what I did. When I got to Mobile, I started up again and I went along the coast. So yeah, I'm gonna go into a little bit of I'm gonna hit Mississippi right here. And you're right along this coast, you know, I mean, you saw the water. There was the Gulf of Mexico. And the road I was on was this US 90, which, by the way, you can take all the way across the country. And I picked it up in several places. But it's a major road. But, you know, you got somewhat of a breakdown lane. Out west, there was a huge breakdown lane. The other thing, that's interesting thing about this slide is the Waffle House. And I didn't mean to take it but that's where I sometimes were forced to eat. Turns out in a lot of these little towns, all the little delis or cafes, I mean, they closed up. So the only place you're eating are these national chains, breakfast, lunch, whatever. And so that was a little bit of a letdown because I like to eat the food. You know, if I'm going through the South, I want to find some collard greens, some catfish or fried chicken or something, right? But what am I doing? I'm eating at, you know, national chains along the way. Not always, a few places I got it. So again, I got into Mississippi, so I'm on my way again. And then this is kind of the stuff I like about biking. You see these little roadside signs you would just blow by in a car. Jimmy Buffett, the singer, you know, wasting away in Margaritaville or whatever, he was born here in Pascagoula, Mississippi. That's the kind of stuff I like. You wouldn't see this in a car, you know. And then going across Biloxi Bay, guess what? More fog, but at least I had a breakdown lane. But it was a lot of fog now that I think about it. Then I finally got along the Gulf of Mexico, and I noticed, though, that the traffic was heavier than it should have been. And so I found out that if I got off the road, there was this, right along the Gulf, there was this walkway. Nobody's there on the beach, but it would be full of people going to the beach in the summertime. So I biked along this for quite a ways just because the traffic was getting bad. And I couldn't figure out why the traffic, and then it dawned on me, I'm now a week later than I thought I was gonna be because of my brother's illness. It's Mardi Gras season. So everybody, all these little towns along the Mississippi and Louisiana coast are having their Mardi Gras, their own little thing. And so that's, another thing I would have avoided if I would have stayed on schedule. Then it's just, you can see I'm right along the coast. Here's New Orleans. I'm not going that way. I'm going up this way. But all these little towns had their own Mardi Gras, and sometimes it was on the weekends instead of the actual Tuesday. And I remember this one little town I went through was called Pass Christian, and I kind of took a few pictures of it. I don't know if you can tell, but there's a lot of beads on the ground there. Those are not fun when you're bicycling. They're like these little kind of plastic beads, and if you hit them, you can swivel all over the place. But I like any kind of local, music stuff. So John Handy, famous musician, he was from this little town called Pass Christian, and it's kind of neat. By the way, I've got all these slides and more there's a website listed on the brochure. And also, I should mention, when I wrote that, this was a journal basically. Every night I would upload pictures and I would give you my impressions for that day. So now I can talk in retrospect how much fun it was, and there were really no problems. But if you read the journal, there's some grim days in there, like, what am I doing here? I'm too old for this, that kind of stuff. So if you want the real story, read the journal. And here's, I don't know if you can see this again, there's all this decorations left over from the Mardi Gras celebration from the night before. And things like this was a realtor's office, but it's just like, if it doesn't capture Louisiana or Mississippi, it's just like along the coast with all the, the crazy characters and stuff. I don't know, I just caught my eye. Okay, now I make it to Louisiana, and I'm kind of impressed because the states seem to be coming fairly quickly. Of course, if I were to look really concentrated on the map, you'd realize that Texas is coming up. Texas, forget, that's another story. Now again, I was always looking for like local food, and I remember I just couldn't find any. They'd be that were around the motel. And I took this picture of my non-alcoholic beer and that I had at the Outback Steakhouse, which I could, get that up here too, right? So it was kind of like, come on, this is not what I came here for. All right, so I'm going through Louisiana. Things are, doing all right, but I'm finding the traffic is not very nice. Again, the thing I do remember is the dogs loved me. They loved to chase me, more than in any other state. And that the roads were narrow. The state had not done much since the Model T time to widen the roads. So the pickup trucks did not like me on their roads. But that's the way it is. However, the one good thing about Louisiana, I finally got some grilled redfish. And so I had to take a picture of it because this was my reward for 900 miles of bicycling. Got back on the ACA, the Adventure Cycling Association's maps. So now I was going to follow their maps for a little while. One of the reasons was on that route going across the southern, they call it the southern tier, there's other cyclists on that road. So you get to meet other people, especially coming from the other direction, and you can ask them questions. How bad is the weather? Blah, 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 blah. And they can ask you questions. So you actually develop this kind of camaraderie of people on the road. I didn't meet that many. Maybe I met 20 people, but at least it's somebody to talk to who knows what you're doing out there. So getting across the Mississippi, this was kind of nice. A brand new bridge, the James Audubon Bridge. I had my own lane to myself. It was really nice. A lot of the old bridges across the Mississippi are terrible, though. They're so narrow, you don't want to even try to do it. But this Adventure Cycling Association, one of the things they do is find things. They take you out of the way. You're not going as straight as you can, but to get around the major obstacles. And then I remember as soon as I got across the Mississippi, I found this other place where I could get grits. So this is, again, I don't know if this is a bicycling story where you eat or an eating story where you bicycle, but I just wanted to, I want some local stuff, and I finally got it. along the Mississippi, they have these like overflow areas from all the flooding, and there's a lot of flooding. And I pulled over here just to take this picture, and this guy pulls up in like an official truck, it's got some Mississippi Department of blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to be over here. And he says, hey, you got to see down the road. I says, what? He says, there's a bald eagle down there with a nest. It was just like, I said, oh, cool. So he told me how far I had to go, maybe a mile, and look out for this, like it was a big stump in the middle of this lake, which not always is flooded. And there was a nest up there. And that's the kind of stuff that, again, when you're bicycling, and if you're biking by yourself, people are more apt to talk to you than if we're a group. When you're in a group, you can intimidate, Sometimes a group will come into a small cafe and they take over. They're not talking to anybody local, they're talking to each other. So one of the reasons, not only, but one of the reasons I went by myself is I want to go into a place, listen to what they're talking about, engage if they want to engage with me. Sometimes they want to talk about the bike trip, other times they could care less, but that's all right. Went by Buddy Guy's birthplace. Now, I don't know if that's the building he was born in, but that's where the plaque was. Buddy Guy was in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, blues musician, all that stuff. If you're into music, this is the place to go. There's a lot of musicians down here. Okay, now, this was a killer day, I remember. It was 91 miles. Why? Because that's where I could find a motel. Motels were coming harder and harder to get, especially in Louisiana. But I did have some lightly traveled roads, which was nice. I got off the main roads, and I was on the adventure cycling route, so it was kind of nice. They try to avoid really, really, really busy roads. And I came through this little road. It's hard to read, but that little sign says heaven on top. So here, this way it'll say this way to Highway 2, blah, blah, blah. But I just thought it was cool. Somebody put heaven up there, in case you didn't know where it was, I guess. Then I got into these really nice roads. I mean, look there's hardly any cars on it. And even though there's not much of a breakdown lane, there's not very many cars. So this was my reward for taking a more, not direct route, but to go through some, Then because I knew it was a long day, I said, I'm going to get on my cell phone and see if I can find a small shortcut. And so I got on the map, and it says, oh, go this way. But when you're on, they don't tell you you're going to run into things like dirt roads. And I have these, skinny tire bike. Luckily, it was hard-packed dirt, but I didn't know how long it was going to be. And I ended up rejoining the route on the maps that the Adventure Cycling gave out because I didn't want to stay on dirt roads all day. But it was kind of neat. You were out there. You finally got away from the city. It was kind of nice. Got over to, I think this is the last town in Louisiana, De Ritter. I don't know why I took that picture, but it's there. And then I'm slowly coming into Texas. Before I got there, though, I started noticing I'm now seeing ranches. And that's when I think, the cowboy movies, you got to see ranches, right? So got some pictures of some, cows and stuff. And then I see the Texas sign. And for some reason, it was the first time I got emotional because I didn't think I was going to make it. I mean, if I got to, I thought I was over in Mobile, But now I'm in Texas and I'm saying, wow, I made it to Texas, And in my brain, I thought, well, how long does it take to get across Texas? I didn't really, I didn't realize how long it was. And it's 1/3 of the trip. So I thought, 7, 8 days. It took me 16 days. It was almost exactly 1,000 miles. If I would have gone exactly straight, it might have been 850, but the way I went was 1,000 miles. So Texas went on forever. And in fact, this trip, in my mind, is really about Texas, because here's where things got really interesting, okay? One thing I did like about Texas, they had these farm roads and ranch roads. They have numbers on them, so they're not totally just back in the middle, without any way of knowing where you go. And I really enjoyed these roads, at least the eastern part of the state, and I'll tell you more about that. Then I started noticing, I stopped at a place, I can't remember the town, Kirbyville or something, and that's when I started seeing more and more Mexican restaurants. And I like all kinds of food, but Mexican food I like. And while I was in there, I noticed this picture I guess this is a famous picture of Pancho Villa Zapata and the president of Mexico. They had some big summit to solve their, differences. But it was on the inside the Mexican restaurant. And I got there earlier in the day before most people showed up, so I was just talking to the owner. And but if you want to read more about these guys, just go into Google, you'll see this picture. So then, all along, I have been, like the temperatures, sometimes they would start out, would be really cold in the morning. Not colder than here, but like say 32, and then we get up to 50s and 60s. But now, suddenly the heat goes up to 88 degrees, and this is still March. I said, what's going on here? Shouldn't it be colder? So you have these days where, you don't know what to expect, and part of it is the temperature. But it was getting really hot all of a sudden, unusually hot for that time of year. I was in a little cafe and I found a local one again, and I found this like mural on the side. I just thought it was pretty cool with all these cowboys and stuff, and the cross and the guy. I don't know who got buried there, but it was just kind of neat. This is just a little thing. When I'm going along, I'm also interested in road signs. And this one was for Spurger. And I just thought, Spurger, what kind of name is Spurger? I've been in all 48 lower states. I've never run into another Spurger. And so I just had to take a picture of Spurger. By the way, one thing, I don't know if you noticed, things are getting more wide open. There's still trees. As we go along, you're going to see fewer and fewer trees, or they'll be shorter and shorter. And after a while, your mind just starts expanding. At least for me, it did. And then again, some more of these Texas roads. This was called a farm road, sometimes called ranch roads, but it was really kind of nice out there, And so moving along, I'm going to go toward, I'm going above Houston and I'm going toward Austin. And Austin was the place I was going to make the decision, am I going to turn back and say to heck with it? Does my body and my brain had enough of this? So again, another foggy day, and the temperatures that were 88, now they dive again. And you can see there's a picture for like 15 miles, I'm in this fog. It wasn't total fog, but again, more like a soup. And I took a picture of going through Sam Houston University, and you can see that's foggy because my cell phone that I'm taking the pictures with was all fogged up. So then I'm looking ahead on the map, and by the way, I try not to look more than a day ahead, because if you look more than a day ahead, you'll just say, I'm not going to do this. So I said, I want to find a place I can stop. I've been going now since I left Mobile. And in the old days, I would stop every 7th day, but that's when I could do 100 miles a day. Now I'm doing fewer miles, so I don't want to stop as much because I still want to get the miles in. So I decided I'm going to College Station, where Texas A&M has this huge campus, and I thought, wow, that'd be nice. There'd be lots of students around. There'd be like coffee houses and just something that's different, right? And so I'm taking off. I'm going to hit Texas A&M. I'm telling myself I got a rest day, which is nice because now you can actually wash your clothes. They get a little steamy after a while. Although it's surprising with this new stuff they have. I mean, when I say new, the new materials they have for bicycling, it wicks very quickly, so you can just wash a lot of it in the sink in the motel, hang it up, and in the morning it's dry. So that's, in the old days when you're wearing wool and all that stuff, it would never dry out. So more fog. It just keeps going. I don't know, never realized how much fog. Then I start seeing these ranches, huge ranches, and the buildings are way off the road. The actual ranches they usually have these roads, you go way up there. So now I know I'm really into ranch territory. I'm out of I'll call it the old South, and more into the Texas kind of ranch stuff. And then I see this sign for Texas A&M, but unfortunately the campus itself was like a half mile way back there. And once I got off my bike, I said, I don't want to walk. I just don't want to walk. So I ended up, and then it turns out I asked in the motel, where's everybody? Oh, it's spring break. So So my idea of sitting around with all the hipsters, forget it. Nobody was around. So, but that's the way it goes. You don't know what you're going to run into. Then the next day, this is where I call it the kind of the slog fest starts, where you just are getting to the point where you're just doing miles. However, you can see, it's still flat. And I had a breakdown lane, the rumble sticks over here. The problem is the pavement on the side of the road gets really rough. And you start getting the shaking that I've never experienced out east. And it went on like this for a lot of Texas. More wide open spaces. But then I came across the Chisholm Trail. Cool, I know about the Chisholm Trail. The cattle went this way. So again, these are little plaques along the side of the road. You're going 65 miles an hour in the car. I just thought, wow, this is the kind of stuff I like to see. Just more, it gets open, more and more open. Then I decide I'm going. I realized that now I'm moving up in elevation. And until this point, I didn't notice that much elevation. There were some hills, but now I'm actually moving up, This guy here, I don't know, he's just a smiley face on a tank. Why he's there, why he's so happy, I don't know. Then I stopped at some like farmer's market, but like inside, and there was this great mural. Again, I like, somebody went out of the way to paint this mural. Then I approached Austin. I actually went through the city. They have some I usually avoid bike lanes, but I used them anyway. And I got right along the river, and then I came across the river, and then I took a picture after I got out of Austin. Austin was a unique town, though. It's a lot of young people, and it's not quite Boston, but you could, almost feel a little bit of that vibe. The thing I did not know, though, I still had another 40 miles to go or something, because that's where the motel was. And I forgot about this. These hills, they're up and down, up and down. And the reason, apparently, at these little bottom parts is where the stream goes across. And they don't want to build a bridge, costs too much money. So they go down and meet the stream. So you have to worry about that because, as the sign says, warning, stream, subject to flooding. And so this went on, and this is at the end of the day, and my legs are killing me. But this was called Texas Hill Country, which I guess I should have known if I would have read a little bit in advance on the map, but I didn't. But this was really interesting because there was one place where I did actually have to go over a small amount of water. But they have these posts along the road right as you do the dip, and they'll say 1 feet, 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet. So if you're in a car or a bike, and you see that it's up to 4 feet, that you're not going to make it through there. And then the question would come, well, how? I can't go back because there's only one. I don't know what you do during flood season, but luckily I only had one small little ford I had to go across. But it is dangerous in a way if you don't know what you're doing. So again, moving through Texas, now it's starting to get really wide open. And very remote ranch roads I'm going through. So I started out early in the morning. This is the Pertinalis River. I don't know if Lyndon Johnson lives near here, or used to. There's the LBJ Ranch near here. And I get on these local roads, and I wouldn't have gone on these normally. Normally, if I'm going through, I would just take the main road. But the adventure cycling says you can go this way. So I'm starting to get more and more like there's no towns, there's nothing, just some ranches. There's more ranches. And, oh, by the way, there's this, I saw another road sign, Road. And I started thinking, this reminds me like an Abbott and Costello thing, like who's on first, what's on second, like, oh, where'd you come from? Road. No, well, where did you ride from? Road. Well, which road? You could just play with that. But anyway, they took me through ranches where these are cattle guards to keep the cattle from getting out. And you can go very slowly across that on your bike. But these little roads, I thought they weren't even, public roads. And I'd come through and there'd be an old like a building there, and people were working around it, doing stuff, and they look at me and I look at them. They didn't say get out, so I just kept going, but it was really nice. You're going from the East Coast and suddenly you're out there. It's why you go bicycling, or any kind of adventure for that matter. So moving along, by the way, now this is the fun part. See these steep, this is getting to be like not fun. My idea was to get to Camp Wood that day, and the last part of Camp Wood was, climbing this guy. And it wasn't that steep, it just looks like it's steep, but it was still, I don't know, 10%, I don't know what it was, 8%, who knows what it was. It wasn't as bad as like Vermont, where you get 16% some places. But it's near the end of the day, and you still want to see it. But again, on the way there, I went through an area called along the Guadalupe River, and after this little town of Hunt, Texas, I had the road pretty much to myself, but it was terrible road. It was just constant vibration. Somebody said it's called chip seal. They just throw tar down, throw this chip seal, this gravel or whatever on, and then the road gets packed down by the cars and the trucks. But for a bicyclist, it was really bad. I mean, it was just vibrating my whole body, and I was worried about breaking spokes and all that. This went for a long time. And I remember I said, I got to get off out of these hills. So the adventure cycling says go left, and I look more hills. So I said, I'm going to go straight ahead and see it. I'm going to connect up to a major highway, and hopefully there will be not going over the hills, but cutting through them. And I got lucky. I got cut. See that nice little cut there? Instead of going over the hills, so that was one of the times where I had no idea if it was going to work, but it did work out. I went through this little town of Lakey. It looks like Leaky, but I pronounce it Lakey. So you got your guns and ammo and all that stuff. Then the tough part, I had to climb up this ridge. It was so narrow, like I was worried cars coming up behind me on a curve couldn't see me. But I got lucky. I might have been a Sunday or something. I was low traffic. And then finally, I thought I hit the top, and I see this, what looks like a downhill. And it was, and then I got into Camp Wood, population whatever, 300-400, and there's downtown Camp Wood. And this is the kind of stuff where, there's the motel, the place to eat, the gas station. So, and by the way, even farther west, there's not even that. You don't even get a place to eat. So the thing about Camp Wood that stays in my mind is my Verizon phone would not work, and I always would call back home every night, and I also post my pictures, so people who are following me know that I made it. I'm not roadkill on the side of the road. And it doesn't work, so I go to the place to eat, and she says, well, you got to have an AT&T phone here. I says, really? Don't they, have like a thing, a deal with? She says, no, if you don't have AT&T, you're not calling anybody. So she let me use her phone. I left a message for my daughters to say I'm okay. Then I get to the motel, and I said, well, at least I'm going to be able to upload my pictures and my thing, but the internet's down there. So it's very interesting to be without contact to the outside world for just even one day. You're so used to having that contact. Now, when I started biking many years ago, 55 years ago, you didn't have, internet, you had nothing, and you would just hope to find a motel or a campground down the road. That's what you did. You didn't know where you're going to stay. But now you get used to it. I have all this connection. But I remember being there at night saying, wow, I wonder, you can't even conceive of like going across the plains with wagons and stuff and not having any contact. Anyway, that was interesting. Then I started going toward the Rio Grande down here, and this area here, there is a lot of nothing. I remember till I got to Bracketville, I didn't hit a store or anything. It was like 45 miles. And then in Bracketville, I could get food and water and stuff. But the idea was I'm going toward Del Rio, but now you start seeing some of these, I guess you could call them mesas, along the side of the road. I think I can't remember if I'm on the adventure cycling thing. Here's some more of these ranch roads. Now again, where do you eat? Where do you get water? and it's usually at a gas station. So I had to take this picture of what I call gas station food. I call it my carbonated sandwich. Who knows when that was put together? Reconstituted potato chip. Then the milk was probably the best, you know. But you can't find any, like, forget about finding local food. There is no local food. You're eating this junk for quite a while. Another Chihuahua Road, 49ers came through here. Now I'm going kind of along the Mexican border next to the Rio Grande, not exactly next to it. I'm moving up into elevation right there. You don't really think too much about it. Then I'm on back to US 90, which I had seen all the way back in Florida. I got a nice breakdown rain, but again, the road was really tough on me. Went by this recreation area, and I stayed at this place called Comstock, where they have a motel. Across the street is a place that says "Eat Here," you know. In fact, here's "Eat Here." You know, there's no. Oh, maybe it does say. If you look real close, there's probably a name on it. But so I was lucky because this is the last motel for 88 miles, and this is why the real trip starts like around right here when you're starting to worry about. You know, are there buzzards up there waiting for me? So this next day was going to be a real test. I did hear, though, that there was a water stop around 25 miles out. But I loaded up, I thought, with enough food and water. And this is what it kind of starts looking like. You know, it just goes, and there's mesas and stuff on each side. It's quite spectacular. And your brain, notice there's no trees anymore. Your brain just like does this. Now some people might go crazy, but that's another thing. That's their problem, not mine. Then I ran into the Judge Roy Bean. They put up this brand new, relatively brand new museum. Judge Roy Bean would hold trial there. There was a Paul Newman movie about it. He'd just have trials out on his porch, and then he would find people. The money went in his pocket. He didn't really have a jail. He just, you know, he'd find people for public drunkenness and stuff like that. But I stopped at this museum, and it was very nice, but they had no food there, but I got water. So I says, all right, that's good, water's good. And then as I'm coming out, this is the town of Langtree, I came to this gas station slash grocery store slash motel. And other cyclists told me that they had stayed there just 2 days ago. I came through there, nobody's there. You can't knock on doors, nobody's there. The guy who runs it apparently is kind of flaky. Sometimes he wants to open up, sometimes he wasn't. But if I would have known it was there and I could have booked it, I tried to call him once and he wouldn't answer. So I just sat here and ate my sandwich on his picnic table. Then I get into these areas of just vast expanse. Dryden, somebody, in the adventure cycling map, it said there's a store there. So I thought, great, this is about, you know, it was an 88-mile day. I was going to get that around 70 miles. And Dryden was also, there was an air base there and stuff, a lot of military stuff. It used to be there, some of it's still there. And then you get this wide open space, and there's that 90. It just keeps going and going and going. It turns out that the store was closed in Dryden, and I couldn't find any place to get water. I saw a post office. I went in, but there was nobody in it. And I was going to go around the back, see if I could find a spigot, and there's these dogs back there, like just looking at me, and I said, eh. So this was a mistake. Even though I'm an experienced cyclist, I ran out of water 10 miles from the end, but the weather was cooperating. It wasn't extremely overly hot. So I did finally make it to my place that night. So again, now we're getting up in elevation. So the next day, this was interesting though, because in the little town of Marathon, halfway across, I found the Oasis Cafe. I walk in, again, it's a Mexican restaurant. The people in there just let me, sit over there. They ignore me. And in walk 3 cowboys, real cowboys, big Stetson hats with spurs on. And they're like dragging those spurs across, the wooden floor. And I thought, I guess they must be regulars because nobody's saying anything about it. But I thought, but these were real cowboys. I didn't say anything to them. They're looking at me probably like, what's this guy with his vest on? Some guy from the East probably, you know. But it was kind of neat. I actually ran into the cowboys. I didn't talk to them, but they were in the same place I was. So that was like a highlight, you know, just something that you wouldn't see, you know, in New Hampshire, for example. Then you go through, again, this wide open space, and along the road, there's a railroad, I noticed. And it turns out, the way I got home is I took the Amtrak home, and it uses that same railroad track, because I noticed some stuff when I'm looking out the window coming back. This is the one that sticks in my mind, though, and I think I put it on there. It just captures the trip for me. You've got this long road, no trees. It wasn't super hot, but it did get hot sometimes later in the day, and you have those mountains just kind of framing everything. The traffic, by the way, is at 75 miles an hour, but I had the breakdown lane. So then this was probably the highest point. It was maybe almost 5,000 feet. I had to go over that, but it was a short day, so that was good. This is the one time I actually had a place I wanted to go through, Marfa. Marfa is an artist colony. It used to be an old town that was on its legs. Artists moved in there. And so I got there early. By the way, here's just some more beautiful scenery. And those clouds. I mean, we probably have clouds like that around here with the trees. You know, you can't see above the trees. They went through this area where there was these mysterious lights called Marfa lights. There was a pavilion for it. But then I got to town, I just walked around, I got there early, and I saw the courthouse, just, the old mission church. And then I see things like this, and they would just be sitting there on the sidewalk, and at first you say, well, is that art or is that a beat-up car? And then you look at it and say, oh, wait a minute, it must be art because there's a railroad thing behind. And there was things like this all throughout this town, and it was just like, what the heck is, I just went through all this desert and stuff, and now there's these artists. And like this one here, it says, I call it my boo thing, and somebody just hung it up. So Marfa was, again, a highlight for me. If you ever go out there, you might want to check this place out. Then again, this section, 74 miles with no food, no water. And I know that because it tells me that. And I mean, there was not a gas station, there was nothing. Now, another thing, I wasn't expecting this next part. I figured it's just all desert. I don't know, maybe 15 miles out of town, I see this. It's not a billboard, it's like a cutout, but there's the background. This turns out to be Elizabeth Taylor and James Dean, who were in the movie Giant, which apparently they filmed out there. And while I'm going by, I actually hear the Giant theme. Somebody had rigged up like a solar panel thing, and they kept repeating the Giant theme. And I remember seeing this as a kid, like I was 9 or 10, and had no idea. I lived in Michigan. I didn't have no idea what Texas looked like. So it was just like one of those things, what's it doing out here? And there's Rock Hudson, I think, in the car. And again, this cutout, and then behind it is the sky. And it was just, you're out in the middle of nowhere. And so they did build these cement benches for picnic tables, but they didn't have any water and there's no shade. But they have the barbecue thing there, I guess. So I guess if you're in a car, it was nice, but I was hoping to find water, but no water. This is another one. You may have seen this in books. It's a phony store. It's only like 10 feet deep. Some artists did it in Marfa. And so I stopped and took a picture of it. And a lot of people just pull off the road and take a picture of it because it's so, like, what's the word, incongruous? Like, what's it doing out here? But this is Texas, man. This is an interesting state. Then I think these are pecan trees. For the first time in, 800 miles or something, I'm seeing agriculture. There's nothing out there like agriculture. There's ranches and stuff. So I thought, well, that's pretty cool. And this is only if you're in a bicycling. Somebody actually put this like really smooth sealant on the side of the road for like 8 miles. I was in heaven. All that shock from my hands and back and everything, I was like gliding along. So it's only if you're into biking, if you care about that. And then it went away after that. It was, I don't know if it was some kind of like test or what. Now, this is interesting. I don't have any choice. I have to get on the interstate now. It's the only road. and it's legal. So I got an Interstate 10. Some people say, can you do that? Yes, it's legal in certain areas because there are no other roads to take. Now the interstate's good and bad. You have the whole breakdown lane yourself, which is actually better than a normal road, but it's full of all these wires and stuff from blown tires, all the steel belted stuff. So it was kind of good and kind of bad. As I left, I noticed the moon was still up there. That was pretty cool. And I hit mountain time, like, wow, mountain time, like again, just a few days, I don't know, 15 days ago I was in Louisiana, and now I'm in mountain time. So this was actually an access road along I-10. I went along it for a little while. And then again, I'm going toward El Paso and finally, hopefully getting out of Texas. I'm right along the Rio Grande, and then I started seeing more of the pecan groves and signs that say, get out of here or we'll shoot you, and don't that kind of stuff. Another Mexican restaurant, which I loved, it wasn't on any map or anything. That was great. Then I get to El Paso, which is quite a large city, but nothing like compared to going through Boston traffic. So now I'm saying, I can finally get out of Texas. There's something about just not seeing another sign. So I decide I'm going right along, as soon as I get out of El Paso, right along the Mexican border. I'm on a road to this little town called Columbus. There is zero out there. No towns, no nothing. Again, just had the whole thing. So there's my New Mexico sign. When I'm on that road to Columbus, this thing shows up. I don't know what it is. Is it like a Marfa thing, where it's supposed to be a decoration? I have no idea what it is, but, it breaks up. You can see there's nothing out there. And then there's this thing. I don't know, was it some kind of celebration? Don't know. Just more of that grand open stuff. Now I see mountains over to the side. And then I stayed in Columbus, right on the Mexican border, maybe, I don't know, half mile away. And in here, there was this little eatery, which was nice, borderland with the, they had some plaques up. Turns out that Pancho Villa raided the town back in whatever it was, 1910 or something. I don't know what it was. And then I had to go north because I didn't want to go west. There was nothing. There's no places to stay. So I had to again go north, rejoin the freeway, which I didn't really want to do. But you can see I'm going up again. And there's that, wide open feeling, more stuff. It's the West, I mean, it's New Mexico, but it's like Texas. It just keeps going and going. And then I go toward this, I have to get back on the I-10, go toward Lordsburg, and this is like where I just I'm not having fun. But I did go through areas like this before I hit the freeway. There was a wagon trail, apparently famous, look it up on the internet. And this was weird. I'm on Interstate 10, and there's no big climb, and suddenly it says Continental Divide. If you're going down the Continental Divide, you expect some big, big thing. It was flat as far as I could tell. But here's what happened. As I'm approaching Lordsburg, I hear plump, 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 and I say, oh, I got one of those wires in my tire. I stop, I look in the back, pull out this fairly big wire, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to hear the psst. The flat tire. I pull it out, I don't hear anything. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to keep riding. Might be a slow leak, I can fix it later. 5 miles down the road, plump, 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 the front tire gets another one of these wires. And I says, I can't be this lucky. I pull it out, it's still held. But I hated this whole section. The whole breakdown lane was full of these wires. It was not any fun. And anyway, Lordsburg, I wanted to get out of there. Then I almost, I'm climbing, I'm going toward Arizona, and finally hit Arizona. I run into this old grouchy guy. I don't know how he got my picture. So I'm in Arizona, and I'm feeling wow, wait a minute, I only got 2 more states to go. But I am starting to feel it. It's getting what is this, day 30 or something, 35. Saw this, I thought it was cute in another cafe, just something to keep my mind going. Now I see mountains with snow on them, and I know I'm getting up there. I'm going to avoid those mountains, though. I don't want to go over those. More wide open stuff. Now I'm going up, I'm climbing again. But I started seeing agricultural land, which again, I wasn't expecting to see. So there must have been some irrigation. But seeing some more mountains, I went through a Apache Indian reservation where they put up this brand new pavilion, and it talks about all the cultural things. I stayed there had lunch. And then just seeing more and more of these climbing, mountains and stuff. Now, at this point, I'm not too far from Phoenix, and I called my friend from high school. I said, hey, can I stop by? I was going to give me a chance to just not think about bicycling, but turns out he was going out of town just as I was entering town, so I never got to see him. But I did get to go up this spectacular climb through the mountains, and then before I got to Phoenix. And for some reason, I don't know, I like this of all the climbs. The problem is it goes through a tunnel. The tunnel may be quarter mile long, and it was kind of dangerous. And in fact, the adventure cycling people said, don't go through that tunnel. Go like 40 miles out of your way. But at this time, I wanted to go as straight as I could. So I went through the tunnel. I got lucky. I have lights on my bike flashing on the back, so hopefully if somebody came up, they would see me. Just some more spectacular stuff, and then I finally get to go downhill. I mean, again, the grades out west aren't too bad. They're just long. They're not like Vermont where you're really steep. This was neat because I was going on that bridge, and I forgot that the wind was coming from that direction, and as I'm going like this, the wind starts pushing me on, and I'm looking off. I thought I was an experienced cyclist, but you always make some stupid mistake. So luckily I managed to lean enough not to end up on somewhere down there. Cactus, finally seeing the cactus. Get into boring Phoenix, just flat as heck, pretty boring. But they did have large bike lanes along the side of the road. Getting out of Phoenix, though, they sent me along this canal, which sounded pretty cool at first because you're not dealing with traffic, but you had to deal with these tunnels that went under the roads, and they were very dangerous. And I thought about I would never put a kid on this because you go down in the tunnels, you can't see anything. They're narrow, and somebody else is coming down really fast from the other direction. So I was not a big fan of that. Got up to this area where all the dude ranches are, had some food and another Mexican food place. Then I started going pretty much west, again, elevation climb. Went through this whole area, was dude ranches, more open spaces. Then I finally hit this. The first time I see something to do with California. And I thought, hey, wow, I'm almost there. 300 miles, I can do this. I'm getting a little tired at this point, but I said 300 miles at, what did it take me, 4 or 5 days? I don't know. I'm going to San Diego, but the whole idea was the fact you saw a sign that says LA just down the road, right? If you're in a car, you're there in 5 hours, right? So again, more climbing. This is the part that was scary. I went through this really windy area. I met some cyclists coming the other way. They said they had a wind in their face for like 30 miles over 30 miles an hour. And I thought, but you don't know if the winds change, so you know it's going to be your tailwind or their headwind. And I was really worried about the wind because it just takes it out of you. But I got lucky. I found the California line. It's actually a pedestrian walkway next to the freeway. So I walked into California, didn't have to check. Nobody checked me for citrus, so I beat the system. This is more one of those wide open places. But I did go through some agricultural land, which I was surprised at again. But there was like places where there was just nothing to eat or drink. Beautiful, but kind of dicey. And then I saw palm trees, which I was, what the heck, palm trees, but more wide open land. Then I'm almost I am in California, but I still have a section of desert to go. And I noticed this sign, gasoline, $3.69, because these little towns, in order to bring a tanker out there, it costs money, and there aren't that many people live out there. So you're paying more there than you would here. I went through this really bad road called, it was Plaster City. There was, I think, a gypsum plant, all truck traffic. I didn't meet that many trucks, but it beat up the road again. I was back to this bouncing around. So I thought Texas had the worst overall roads, at least in West Texas. But this part was probably the worst road I'd ever been on in all 55 years of biking. It went for 8 miles like that. Really terrible road. But there I saw some wind farms, but I got the whole road to myself. Now the fun part, I have to go over the mountains to finally get to San Diego. I get back on Interstate 8, not Interstate 9 or 10. And you see a sign, 1,000 feet, okay, no big deal. But now it's getting hot. Even though I'm going up, I thought I would get cooler, but it gets hotter and hotter. My little computer says 07, which means 107. I don't think it was that hot, but it's probably 99 or something. It was really, really hot. It was the hottest I'd been on this trip. So I'm running out of water. This is really dumb of me. I didn't expect to be drinking that much water. So I'm moving 3,000 feet. I said, oh, it can't be much further. But at this point, I did run out of water. And there's no water up there. There's no places to stop, except they have these pullover places for cars, radiators, that says if you're overheating, you can use this water to put in your radiator. It says, do not drink this water. But I stopped anyway. I didn't drink the water, but I just poured it over my head. Now this water is full of all kinds of bugs and stuff, but at this point I didn't care. I just poured it over my head, and as I'm going up and up and up, a car pulls over. I thought, whoa, this is cool. He's going to offer me some water. Rolls down his window and he says, hey, where's the next exit? I'm running out of gas. And I said, I think it's like a mile up the road, but I'm not exactly sure. And before I can say, can I have some water? He just takes off. So I'm over there, and I got another 2 miles to go without a water. I'm not sure where the top is. But I did get to the top, and I managed to coast like 8 miles down into this little town of Jacumba Hot Springs, which had this fantastic motel and had some of the best food I ate on the whole trip. Really good food. It turns out the movie stars used to come here back in the old days, the 30s. Not this particular hotel. They had a grand hotel that burned down. But this was really nice. And I thought from here I must have crested the mountains. It's all downhill. That was a mistake. I had to go up still some more. Those first 30 miles are 8 miles an hour. I'm just going real slow. But again, spectacular scenery. And then my goal was to make it to Ocean Beach in San Diego, and the sun's going down because I didn't allow enough time. It was a long day, but I finally made it to Ocean Beach, and there it is. There's a parking lot full of a bunch of people. There's a beach. Put my bike against this post, took a picture of me, and I don't know if you can read this, but it's right there is the doggy pot thing for the pooper scooper or whatever it is. And while I'm standing there, some guy goes, hey, you got to move your bike. I need to get at the pooper scooper. So I said, well, welcome to San Diego. So it wasn't 3,000 miles. It was 2,888 miles. So just to be, it wasn't 3,000. But it was a long trip. And then I took a train home after that. So I'll stop for questions. Any questions? Questions? Anybody? Yeah.
I know your tires were wearing out, but did you have any magic cream for the chamois? How did that work out for 3,000 miles?
I guess I have a pretty good derriere. I didn't have any problems with my bottom, even though the road shock was bad on some of those roads. The question was, what do I do about, do I put any cream in there? No, I'm lucky, I guess.
Well,
I mean, I wished I would have weighed less, instead of, I keep thinking when I was 27, I was like 40 pounds lighter. And it was like putting a bicycle on my back, right? What a dummy. But I actually lost weight since this trip, and I should have lost the weight ahead of the trip. But
steel frame or aluminum?
No, this is a steel frame bike. I bought it. It was my new bike. My first bike I bought in 1963. My new bike I bought in 2004. So this is a 2004 steel lugged bike. Hard to find anymore. You can't buy them. I bought it from a place in California. They specialize in old bikes for touring. And so it has enough room for fenders. A lot of the bikes nowadays, you can't put a fender on. So if you're touring, you're going to hit rain, you need those fenders. It's hard to find one. More questions? Oh, okay.
So you always found a motel?
Well, I always booked ahead in advance.
Stay overnight outside?
No, because I didn't have any camping equipment. I don't know if you saw the picture of the bike. I was pretty stripped down. I didn't have any camping equipment. So I had to make that motel. It was motivation, you know. Some of those long days, you said, I should stop here, but what are you going to stop? I did run into some young people coming in the other direction. One guy was from Switzerland, and I looked at him, and it's interesting you asked. I said, this guy must be like 23, and I thought, he's 1/3 my age. But he was camping out. And I remember meeting him in the desert, a little spot coming at me. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? And he had camped out in the desert. You know, there was no water, nothing. He must have had his own water, enough water and stuff. And I said, aren't you worried about the scorpions? He said, no, I don't worry about scorpions. Well, I would worry about scorpions. I don't want them climbing into bed with me. You know. Was there a question?
Did you get very sore, like the next, after you had a nice rest? Did you almost hate getting back on the bike?
The question would be, you know, getting up in the morning. 2 mornings I got up with this nausea. That was probably my worst thing. And I don't know what it was from, but within like a half hour I was okay. I don't know what it caused it. Was I dehydrated? But the soreness, you know, I know how to pace myself. The sorest I was after a couple of those days, those 91-mile days, and if it ended up with wind in your face, it was a struggle. And the next day you could feel it. But 65-mile-an-hour days aren't too bad once you get in shape. You know, and I liked getting up early in the morning, getting out on the road. Sometimes, you know, before the sun, you saw there was the moon was still up. A lot of it is mind over matter. You've done it before. You know you're going to feel terrible at certain points, but then you hit a nice cafe and you see the cowboys, or you just run across something that's different and you forget about how sore you are. Yep.
It seems from your photos it was cloudy quite a bit.
Yeah.
But did you get a lot more sunshine than that would appear?
Did I get more sunshine? I mean, there were some days, even though you saw the clouds, it was sunny out.
Right.
You know, I remember along the coast going through the Old South, there was a lot of overcast. And I think that, again, because of the way the wind comes off the Gulf of Mexico. It's hard to know. I mean, but speaking of wind, most people say, why'd you go into the wind? Supposedly the wind comes out of the west, but I had just as many tailwinds as I had headwinds. And I got lucky. I didn't get any winds. Most of them would be crosswinds out of the south. And I didn't get any really strong winds that would drop, you know, just stop you in your tracks, like when you go across Kansas or something. People talk about the wind is just so, it's like so loud in your ears, you can't handle it. So I got lucky. I think I got lucky, especially since I was a day late, and I was worried about April being out there in the desert, but it was okay. You know, I didn't want a lot of sun. I usually lather. I'm completely covered, my head, you know, and the only thing is my nose. I wear tights, complete tights, no matter how hot or cold it is, and I cover my arms, so I don't like sun. One more question?
The small towns you pass,
Yeah.
with a very small population, what do they do for work?
What do they do in the small towns? That's a good question. Some of them were like, they'd just be like this collection of old beat up trailers. There was no town left. You know, like it wasn't even like you'd see some downtown that was abandoned. Like when you go through parts of Louisiana and Mississippi, you would see these towns. The buildings were there, but there was nothing there. But you go out west, it just like crumbled. And I have no idea what people do there. Maybe they're all like me, retired. I don't know what they do, you know. But some of them were kind of sad. I mean, rural. It's hard to make it in rural America. You know, there just isn't much to do out there. Everything, agriculture's mechanized and stuff like that. And again, one of the places I had for breakfast, one of the little eat here places, they said, good thing you're here because we're closing down in a week for breakfast. We'll just do like our nighttime bar crowd comes in, you know. Now, they used to have a lot of oil and a lot of mining was a big deal out there. Mining, you go through these towns and they were based on mines, but the mines have kind of dried up. The military is still out there in some places. It's a good question what people do. The bicyclists kept a lot of these little mom and pop motels in business because I'm guessing, I don't know how many come across there, maybe a couple thousand people, I don't know, every year. And all younger than me, but you know, still they're doing it. So you have to stop someplace and there's those little towns, there's no like Quality Inn or any of those chains or anything. You take what you can get. And some of them were, they needed some work, but I didn't care. I was tired, you know, I had a shower, that's all I need. No scorpions, you know. Depends what you want in life, you know.
How about the total cost of this whole deal?
Total cost, I was just spending my kids' inheritance. I didn't care.
Come on, you kept a spreadsheet, right?
No, I didn't. I figured $100 a day.
Wow.
But probably it was more than that. You know, I stayed, you could stay for $50 a day in some motels, and then food was what, $20 or something. Then I paid up to $135 at one place because it was near the Big Bend National Park. And even though the Big Bend is this huge area in Texas, this was like the place where the tourists would stay. And I had to stay there because there's no other place. And $135. I said, what? You know, maybe it averaged 110 a day. I don't know. But again, I couldn't afford this back in my 20s. But now, what the heck? You know, I don't want to have the $20 bills packed around my my casket, you know, with a sign that says he took it with him. I want to spend it now. So, and you know, what are you going to spend your money on anyway? If you took any kind of trip, like, you know, go on a cruise or something, it's going to cost you thousands. So figure it might have cost me $5,000. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something like, yeah.
Thank you.
So would you do it again?
Would I do it again? Not this ride. No, I'm getting too old. But I like week-long trips. I love Vermont. I can go up there and spend a week. But no, this was just one of those things where let's see if I can do it. Because I'm getting, well, now I'm 71, and I was a youngster back when I did this. So what would be the point? You know, I mean, now that I saw Texas and all that, I said, you know, it was you know, a trip of a lifetime, but I don't think I'd do it again. No. One more back there.
How long did the train trip back take, and did you enjoy that?
The train trip back, it was like you'd go to New Orleans, and it took like 2 days, I think, and then stayed in New Orleans, and then came back up. The train wasn't that good. I was even though it was kind of a sleeper car, you know, like if you go to Canada, there's a cross country one up there, which is really nice. The train was, they're not putting much money into these things. It was okay, but I was expecting to be more. I hadn't been on a train ever where I did the sleeping thing, you know. So, but it was, you know, the nice thing about the train, to put your bike on it, you don't have to disassemble it. You can put it in a long box. You don't have to take anything apart. Just turn the handlebars, put it in a box, and then they ship it back to, you don't even have to be on the same train. You just pick it up in Boston when you're done. So, yeah, people who fly their bikes out, they got to disassemble them and do all kinds of stuff, and I don't want to do that. I don't know, we're already like 20 minutes past. Maybe if you want individual questions, you can see me afterwards, and otherwise, thanks for coming out.